She wasn't crazy. She was just the first woman who saw the part of you you never dared to meet. You called her wild, unpredictable, dramatic. You said she felt too much, talked too loud, cried without reason. You said she was the chaos you never asked for. But what if I told you she was not the chaos? She was the mirror. And everything you hated in her was everything you've buried in yourself. This isn't just about a woman, it's about the woman inside you. The one you locked away when they told you, be a man. The one you suffocated when the world said, control yourself. The one you labeled crazy because you couldn't handle how alive she made you feel. Today we're going to talk about her, the wild woman, the hysterical lover, the emotional storm you couldn't weather. Not because she was too much, but because you were never taught how to hold what was real. We're going deep, into shadow, into myth, into memory. Carl Jung warned us, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But when you met her, you didn't transform. You ran, and she became your ghost. You see, the women we call crazy are often the ones who touch the places we fear the most. They cry when we go numb. They rage when we dissociate. They love like fire when all we've known is frost. And so, we demonize them. We reduce them to cliches. She's just unstable. She's bipolar. She's toxic. But what if we're not diagnosing her? We're diagnosing the part of us she awakens. Throughout history, the feminine has been branded as irrational, dangerous, even demonic. From Lilith, the mythic rebel who refused to submit to Adam, to the hysterics of Freud's clinic, to your ex-girlfriend who screamed in your kitchen because she couldn't bear the silence in your soul. This is not a medical case. This is a mirror, and that mirror is cracking. In this video, we'll unravel the archetype of the wild woman, the cultural hysteria around emotional women, and the terrifying truth Jung whispered to us that the feminine you repress becomes the ghost that haunts your life. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because she wants to wake you up. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung, that's not just philosophy, that's warning. Because if you don't face her, you will keep attracting her again and again in different bodies with different names, but always the same lesson. So, are you ready to stop calling her crazy? Or will you destroy every woman who reflects the fire you've forgotten? Let's begin. She didn't speak like the others. She didn't wait for you to finish your sentence. She didn't ask how you were feeling. She told you how you were hiding, and you hated her for it, because deep down, you knew she wasn't wrong. The wild woman doesn't knock at the door of your psyche. She tears it off the hinges. And for those who've spent their entire lives building emotional fortresses, she is nothing short of apocalyptic. But apocalypse, in its original Greek, means unveiling, and she unveils everything. She is not your girlfriend, not your mother, not your enemy. She is an archetype, an ancient, eternal pattern in the human soul, a force of chaos, intuitions, sensuality, rage, and creation. She is the feminine unbound, raw, and sacred in the same breath. She is the fire that cooks the food, but also burns the house down. The psychologist and storyteller Clarissa Pinkola Estés, in her seminal work, Women Who Run with the Wolves, calls her the instinctual self, the untamed feminine soul that has survived centuries of cultural silence. Within every woman there lives a powerful force filled with good instincts, passionate creativity, and ageless knowing. Clarissa Pinkola Estés. But you were taught to fear that force, not because it is dangerous, but because it is uncontrollable. And everything the modern masculine mind cannot control, it pathologizes. She becomes needy, unstable, too intense. In reality, she is a mirror, and what you see reflected there is your own emotional illiteracy. The wild woman doesn't exist to please you. She doesn't smile for social comfort or shrink herself for peace. She bleeds when she speaks. She breaks rules without apology. She feels with a velocity that makes the numb run for cover. And if you weren't taught how to sit with your own discomfort, if your emotional range has been limited to anger, lust, and ambition, then when she arrives, you will collapse, or worse, you will call her crazy. So you don't have to admit she made you feel things you didn't have words for. Centuries before the clinical terms, before psychiatry wrapped emotion in diagnostic codes, there was Lilith. She is older than Eve. She was never made from Adam's rib. She was made from the same earth. equal, elemental, unyielding. And when Adam tried to mount her, literally and symbolically, she refused to lie beneath. She demanded parity. She demanded voice. She demanded something radical, respect without subordination. And for that, she was exiled. She became the first woman to be demonized, not for sin, but for autonomy. In Jewish mysticism and folklore, Lilith was rewritten as a succubus, a child stealer, a demon of the night. But in truth, she was simply the woman who refused to be possessed. Her rebellion became legend. Her story, cautionary. Her name, erased from the Bible. And yet she has survived in the bodies and voices of every woman who refuses to shrink. You have met her, not with wings and talons, but in the way she looked at you, like she saw through your ambition, straight into your ache. You tried to seduce her, but she didn't bite. She wasn't hungry for validation. She had already tasted freedom. And that's what made her dangerous. Carl Jung understood archetypes not as characters, but as living structures of the unconscious. They speak through symbol, through projection, through obsession. And if unrecognized, they possess us, or we attempt to possess them. The wild woman is not a woman you date. She is a confrontation with your own shadow. She carries what you've buried, your capacity to feel deeply, to cry without shame, to rage without violence, to love without bargaining. She returns to you in dreams, in heartbreak, in the long gaze of a woman who will not be dominated. She shows up when the ego is weak and the soul is loud. And what do? You pathologize. You intellectualize. You try to reduce her to logic. But the wild woman is not a puzzle. She is a storm. Jung wrote, "The feminine is not just something pleasant or gentle, it is also feral, emotional, and capable of destruction. To ignore it is to ignore half the truth of life." This is why she terrifies. Not because she is cruel, but because she is truthful. And truth, in a society built on repression, looks a lot like madness. She doesn't just challenge your behavior, she exposes your beliefs. That masculinity means control, that love should be convenient, that depth is dangerous, that only the weak break down. But the wild woman breaks open, not down. She cracks the ego to release the self. And if you've never grieved, if you've never surrendered, if you've never screamed into the void and waited for your own voice to echo back, then yes, she will look insane to you. But madness is often just a misunderstood intensity. Freud didn't understand her. He named her Hysteria. He believed women's suffering came from their wombs, and so he pathologized the very soul of the feminine. He never asked, what if the woman isn't broken? What if the world she lives in is? Painters like Bouguereau and Caspar David Friedrich captured her in oil and shadow, not as villain, but as mystery. The woman alone on the cliff. The girl looking toward the vast stormy sea, the holy one cloaked in sorrow and fire. They did not understand her either, but at least they saw her, and perhaps that's the beginning, to stop analyzing her, to stop fixing her, to stop demanding that she smile while bleeding, and instead to let her stand, in full wildness, in full feeling, as both prophecy and mirror. Because in the end, the wild woman is not just the one you fear. She is the one you are beneath the concrete of conditioning. She is your repressed song, your uncried tears, your unmade choices. And the only question is, will you exile her like Adam exiled Lilith, or will you welcome her back into the garden you've forgotten how to tend? She shakes, she weeps without warning. She stares into silence as if listening to something older than language. And the men around her look away, or worse, they call it drama. You don't understand what's happening, but she does. Something is trying to come through her, a grief older than her own life, a rage not fully hers, a sorrow with no single cause. She is not malfunctioning, she is breaking open, but the world doesn't know how to hold that, so it labels her, and the oldest label is hysterical. The word hysteria comes from the Greek hystera, meaning womb. From the very beginning, female emotion was linked to reproductive organs, as if a woman's pain could only be explained by her biology, never by her experience. Freud saw the symptoms: tremors, fits of crying, sudden paralysis, unexplainable aches. But he didn't see the soul. He saw disorder where there was simply too much feeling, uncategorized, unspeakable, and therefore dangerous. Rather than ask what a woman's pain was saying, he asked how to silence it. And so he prescribed what every terrified society prescribes to the feminine: reduction, pathology, control. Hysteria is the first protest of the body against the lies of the culture, Gabor Mate. In truth, the hysterical woman is a kind of prophet. She carries the weight of what's been unspoken for generations, and her body, no longer willing to cooperate with silence, begins to scream. But it doesn't scream in words. It shakes, it forgets, it collapses. The hysterical woman doesn't fake symptoms. She embodies the unsayable, and this terrifies men who've never been taught to feel. Because if her breakdown means something, then their numbness means something too. Freud's legacy is complicated. He cracked open the unconscious, but left the feminine in chains. He saw libido in every gesture, but failed to see soul. He believed repression was the root of neurosis, but never asked what society forced women to repress. He named their suffering female neurosis. He assumed their sexual trauma was fantasy, and then he buried their truth beneath theory. The result? A century of women medicated for feeling too much, while men were celebrated for feeling too little. But what if hysteria wasn't a sickness? What if it was a form of initiation? There's a painting by Rembrandt, Lucretia, 1666. She's just stabbed herself. A thin ribbon of blood trails down her nightgown. Her eyes don't scream, they mourn. Not her death, but the silence that led to it. She was raped by a king's son, and rather than be defined by shame, she chose to die with her truth intact. This is the essence of hysteria. It is the final protest when all other protests have failed. The hysterical woman is not crazy. She is tired of pretending. Think of Dostoevsky's Katerina Ivanovna in Crime and Punishment. Starving, widowed, ravaged by poverty, yet still dancing for dignity in the face of humiliation. When she collapses, she's not defeated. She's consumed by the impossibility of maintaining order in a disordered world. And still, men call her hysterical, because it's easier to pity a woman than to hear her. It's easier to medicate her than to admit she's revealing a broken system. It's easier to shame her for being too emotional than to question why emotion is taboo in the first place. Jung offers a way out. Where Freud saw symptom, Jung saw symbol. Where Freud sought to dissect, Jung sought to integrate. He believed neurosis was not just a medical problem, but a crisis of meaning. And meaning, Jung believed, lives in the shadow, in what we reject, repress, and exile, which means the hysterical woman in all her intensity is the embodiment of the shadow breaking through. The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego. Carl Jung. To witness her is to witness your own undoing, not in destruction, but in transformation. Her tears are not weakness, they are baptism. Her shaking is not dysfunction, it is initiation. She is the modern-day oracle, not speaking in riddles, but in ruptures. And every time you ignore her, medicate her, ghost her, or call her too much, you miss the invitation, because she's not just breaking down, she's breaking you open. Simone de Beauvoir wrote, "One is not born, rather becomes a woman." And what does it mean to become a woman in a world that fears femininity? It means inheriting centuries of shame and still dancing. It means being told your voice is irrational and still screaming. It means breaking, not because you are weak, but because you've carried too much that wasn't yours. And yet, in every crack, light seeps in. So the next time you see her, the woman who cries during arguments, who questions the rules, who collapses under the weight of feeling, don't look away. She is not asking you to fix her. She is asking you to feel with her, to enter the fire, not to extinguish it, but to become something new in its heat. She is not broken. She is breaking the illusion. And if you're brave enough to sit in that storm, you might discover that the thing she's screaming about is you. She is not chaos. She is the mirror in which your chaos is reflected. You say she's irrational, unpredictable, too intense, too sensitive, but that says more about you than about her. Because what if it's not her instability that scares you, but the truth she forces you to confront? She mirrors the part of you that never learned how to cry, that buried pain beneath performance, that mistook numbness for strength. She holds up the unbearable reflection of your own disconnection from feeling. Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But most men don't want transformation. They want control. And so when she stirs something wild in you, when she awakens a longing that you can't intellectualize, you retreat. Not because she is unsafe, but because she is unsuppressible. She forces you to see the shadow you've spent years perfecting your mask to hide. The wild woman, the hysterical woman, the crazy ex, they are all different masks of the same archetype. Not women who are broken, but women who carry the forbidden. They mirror what you've exiled, your rage, your vulnerability, your helplessness, your hunger. They bring the unconscious to the surface, and the ego, terrified of losing its kingdom, calls it madness. But she is not madness. She is the madness you've disowned. Clarissa Pinkola Estés wrote in Women Who Run with the Wolves, "The wild woman is the one who thunders after injustice. She is the one who dares, who creates, who destroys, who teaches. Her intuition is strong, her will is firm, her spirit a force of nature. And this wildness terrifies men who've only ever known love through control, because the wild woman cannot be owned. She doesn't bend to expectation. She doesn't shrink to make you feel powerful. She is not the mother who soothes. She is not the maiden who pleases. She is the storm that awakens. And when she looks at you, it is not with admiration, but with the kind of knowing that strips you naked. You call her crazy because you cannot manipulate her. You say she's unstable because her pain exposes your emotional illiteracy. She is not your therapist, not your savior, not your toy. She's the flame you dance too close to and now blame for your burns. But here's the brutal truth. You were never afraid of her. You were afraid of yourself around her, because she brings out the parts of you you've worked so hard to keep buried. Your jealousy, your need, your desire to be seen fully, even in your mess, your ache to surrender. She mirrors your hunger for intimacy and your fear that real closeness will destroy you. She is not crazy. She is you, unfiltered. You want to love her, but only on your terms. Only when she's soft, compliant, manageable. But the mirror does not negotiate. It reflects what is, not what you wish it to be. And the longer you look away, the more distorted your life becomes. This is why relationships fail. Because men mistake the mirror for the monster. They run from the very person who could initiate them into a deeper, fuller self. But initiation requires death. Death of control. Death of ego. Death of the false self that only knows how to perform. And most men would rather ghost her than confront themselves. Nietzsche warned us, if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. But he forgot to mention, sometimes the abyss is dressed in eyeliner and speaks in riddles. Sometimes the abyss is a woman who won't be silenced. And when she looks at you, what she really asks is this: can you stay? Can you feel? Can you hold your own darkness without making me carry it for you? Most men can't, so they leave. Call her names. Tell stories where she's the villain and they were the victim of her instability. But the truth? They were the victim of their own avoidance. A real man does not run from the mirror. He stands in front of it, trembling but willing. He doesn't blame her for what he sees. He thanks her. Because it takes unspeakable courage to reflect someone's shadow without flinching, and it takes even more courage to receive it. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow. It is not pleasant. It is not romantic. It is not the stuff of fairy tales. It is brutal. It is humbling. It is awakening. And she, the so-called crazy woman, is your unexpected guide, not to happiness, but to wholeness. Imagine a painting by Caspar David Friedrich. A solitary man stands before a vast, fog-shrouded landscape. He's tiny against the immensity. No path forward. Only silence. Only self. That's what she does to you. She takes away the map, burns the compass, leaves you with nothing but your naked reflection and the question, now what? This is the turning point. The moment when projection becomes reflection. When blaming becomes becoming. When you stop asking, what's wrong with her, and begin asking, what is she showing me about myself? That's when the work begins. And it's not easy. It's not sexy. It doesn't get you applause, but it changes everything. Because the moment you stop fearing the mirror is the moment you stop fearing your own depth. And that is the beginning of real love. Not control, not fantasy, but two souls, raw, fractured, awake, seeing each other clearly, and staying. You didn't escape her. You delayed her return. Men think they've freed themselves when they cut off the so-called crazy woman. They change their number, they block her on social media, they tell their friends they dodged a bullet. But the psyche has a crueler memory than they realize. The woman you repressed returns. Not in the same body, but in the same pattern. The face changes, the voice softens, but the wound is familiar. You fall for her again. Only to find yourself in the same nightmare, accusing a new woman of the same old sins. This isn't coincidence, it's repetition. Freud called it the repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive to reenact old wounds in the futile hope of rewriting the ending. The compulsion to repeat, he wrote, appears in the early stages of analysis in the form of transference. The patient behaves as if the doctor were a figure from their past. But what if the woman you're dating isn't your ex, but your mother? Your unhealed shame, your unmet needs in a seductive disguise? And what if every time you ghost a woman who triggers you, you're actually ghosting the boy inside you who never learned how to feel? Jung took it further. He believed that what we repress doesn't just haunt us, it possesses us. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The wild woman you rejected wasn't an interruption to your path. She was the path. The fork in the road where growth was possible, but you chose familiarity over transformation. And so the pattern repeats. You meet her again, in a different dress, with a different name, but she still reflects the same shadow you refused to integrate. The same old feelings return, the panic, the powerlessness, the overwhelming need to either fix her or flee her. But none of it is about her. It's about you, and your refusal to face the unconscious forces you projected onto her body. There's a painting by Rembrandt, The Return of the Prodigal Son. A broken man kneels into the arms of his father. His clothes are torn. His head is shaved. He's not proud. He's not defiant. He's returned. That's what integration feels like, not fun, but tender, humbling, human. When a man stops running from the mirror and finally sees the so-called madness as part of himself, he doesn't just become free, he becomes whole. Because here's the truth few dare to speak. The crazy woman isn't real. She's a psychological construct, a scapegoat created by men to avoid taking responsibility for their emotional illiteracy. When you label her hysterical, you don't have to listen. When you call her manipulative, you don't have to look inward. When you brand her unstable, you don't have to confront your own fragility. You make her carry what you can't hold. But projection has a cost. Every woman becomes the enemy. Every intimacy becomes a battlefield. And eventually, every relationship becomes a mirror of your refusal to evolve. You date the same pain in different dresses, and you call it bad luck. But this isn't bad luck. This is karma of the psyche. The lesson you refuse becomes the lesson that pursues, and there is no escape, only integration. Erich Fromm said it beautifully. Immature love says, I love you because I need you. Mature love says, I need you because I love you. Most men never reach mature love because they don't know who they are without needing someone to blame. So they stay stuck in the cycle, attracted to the fire, burned by the flame, retreating into numbness until the hunger returns, and they repeat. Not because they are evil, but because they are unconscious. Gabor Mate often reminds us, the attempt to escape pain creates more pain. Your avoidance of the wild woman, your need to label, to dismiss, to ghost, isn't protection, it's prolonging the wound. She's not your enemy, she's your invitation, an initiation even, into feeling, into shadow, into self. Simone de Beauvoir once wrote, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Perhaps the same is true of men. You are not born a man, you become one. In the moment you stop blaming women for what you've never processed, the wild woman appears when the boy in you is ready to die. Not physically, psychologically, when he's ready to let go of his defenses, his excuses, his desire to be mothered and admired instead of challenged and transformed. She comes as fire. But the fire isn't there to destroy you. It's there to burn away the falseness. If you run, you repeat. If you stay, you integrate. Carl Jung again, what you resist persists. What you look at disappears. The crazy woman disappears, not because she was imaginary, but because what you once saw as madness becomes meaning. You stop needing to control her because you've learned to hold yourself. And suddenly, she is not your trigger. She is your mirror no more. Because what you have integrated no longer needs to haunt you.